Hi, Cultivation Crew. So I hope you're really excited for this session. It's called The Other Guys. So we're going to talk about what makes a plant and what makes the other guys different. So when we think of a plant, we normally think of a couple of specific things. So normally when you're thinking about a plant, you're going to think there's a stem, there's leaves, roots, and then flowers and seeds. So that's what makes up a normal plant. They're usually also going to be the color green because when plants make their food from the sunlight in a process called photosynthesis, there's a video about that included in your Cultivation Crew newsletter. They make this stuff called chlorophyll, and the sunlight making the food with the photosynthesis makes the chlorophyll this beautiful green color. And so that means that the plant is healthy and alive and strong. And when you watch that video, you'll learn a little bit more about that. So most plants are the beautiful green color, like this tree behind me. And that's what you think about when you think of a normal plant, are a lot of those things. So then there are some other weird guys out there. So like algae, like seaweed. I mean, it grows in the water, first of all, for the most part. And some of the algae that floats on top of the water, it doesn't even seem to have any roots attached to it. Or moss seems a little weird, but it's still green, right? Or how about mushrooms? Or lichens, which are really cool things that you find on tree branches, rocks, or stones. These are all a little bit different than a normal plant, and some of them still count as plants and some of them don't. So we're going to talk about that real quick. So we're going to make it easy right now and divide plants into two categories. So the first category for plants is going to be plants that make seeds. So with the plants that do make seeds, we have two options. Either the plants make seeds because they have flowers, or they never make any flowers. So the plants that do have seeds and make flowers would be most of the plants that you know. So this would be like sunflowers, tomatoes, apples, pears, zucchini, most of your fruits and vegetables, most of the plants that you're familiar with. Those are going to both make seeds and make flowers. The other option for plants that make seeds, these are going to be like pine trees. So pine trees don't actually ever make flowers. They make their little pine cone, and then the seeds grow inside. And so these are the two options of plants that make seeds. So plants that make seeds with flowers are called angiosperms, and plants that make seeds and never have flowers are called gymnosperms. So angiosperms would be like your fruits and veggies with flowers. Gymnosperms are pine trees mostly. Okay, so we've done the plants that make seeds. What about the other plants, the plants that don't make seeds? So the different things that you can have in this category are algae, moss, and ferns. So algae is like seaweed. And the stuff that you see floating on top of ponds, that green stuff, the stuff that is kind of slimy and touches your toes when you've been to the ocean or in lakes, that's going to be algae. And algae is in a lot of things. Algae is actually in your toothpaste. Algae is in ice cream. Algae can be in dairy products like milkshakes to thicken it up. Algae's in a lot of things. It's pretty cool. And normally people use seaweed to be able to do that. So there definitely is seaweed extract in your toothpaste. Another option is mosses, which I think we all know what mosses are. The nice green fuzzy stuff on logs and on stones and basically everywhere that it's dark enough and has enough water. And then ferns, which if you don't know what they are, here's a picture. And we see them a lot when we look at old drawings of dinosaurs or what we thought dinosaurs were like, because ferns are so old that they were probably one of the first plants to ever be created, to ever be in existence. So that's pretty cool. So the way that you know the difference between a moss, fern, and algae is none of them make seeds, first of all. So if you're looking at a plant that has no roots, stems, or leaves, what makes it a plant then? That's what algae is. So some people would say that algae isn't technically a plant because it doesn't have any stems, it doesn't have any roots, it doesn't have any leaves. So then what makes it a plant? It's the chlorophyll, the photosynthesis. It's the fact that algae can make its own food by the sunlight, which you can see from the nice, beautiful green color of algae. So that's option one, that's algae. Secondly, we've got the option that they have things that look like roots, stems, or leaves without really being those things, and that would be moss. So moss sticks to things. It's got something holding it down, but it's not true roots. And they've got these little different pieces of them, but they're not true leaves or stems. So that's the category moss fits under. And then a plant that does have true stems, roots, and leaves, but creates spores instead of seeds, are going to be your ferns. So this is how you tell the difference. So just to recap, we have our plants that do make seeds and the plants that don't make seeds. In plants that do make seeds, we have plants with flowers and plants without flowers. In plants that don't make seeds, we have algae, moss, and ferns. And algae may or may not be considered a plant. So there's your little learning lesson for the day. So now that you know some of the differences between all those awesome things, we're going to talk about fungi. So fungi is just kind of like saying funguses, but it's the way you say it. So we don't say funguses, we say fungi, because that's how science works. So fungi, or mushrooms, some people like them, some people hate them. They can look a ton of different ways, and they're all really cool. But fungi are not plants. They might look like plants, they might grow kind of like plants, look like they're growing, but they're not plants. They're not even part of the plant kingdom. And there's a really cool video that I've included that also explains that. So like ferns and moss, fungi actually make spores instead of seeds. And if you've ever turned over a mushroom to look at the gills on the underside, that's where the spores are made, is inside those gills. So we're going to look at some cool mushrooms this week, and we're going to look at a bunch of other cool stuff. This incredible fallen tree has got so many different kinds of our little buddies that we're talking about this week in its ecosystem. So it's got some plants here that looks like some pretty chewed up wild ginger, and then some bedstraw back here. So it's got plants. It's got mushrooms down here. Look at these fun mushrooms. There's these little white ones, and then there's these bright orange guys. And surrounding those are moss. And we've got a lot of moss, some more mushrooms. All the way down here, we've got our little buddy, our snail friend here, also hanging out on this log. And look at all that beautiful moss. And there are so many different bugs. I see some snails and different things that are living inside this log. A beautiful wolf spider right here. Bye, buddy. So this is pretty cool. You can find mushrooms in all sorts of cool places, like even growing out of the very middle of this rotten log. And this is a really cool type of mushroom called a coral mushroom. It looks like tiny little parts of a coral reef. So in this pile of decomposing wood, we've got a lot of our little friends going on. So down here, we've got moss hiding out on this log. We gotta check where we're stepping. So this is jewelweed, not poison ivy. Got no ivy over here. And then over here we've got some more moss going on. And we're gonna pan up. And this tree is covered in lichens, that pretty green and yellow and blue. And then down here we've got fungus, those are mushrooms. We've got different types of mushrooms over here. These ones look like little shelves instead. And then all the way over here, we have what look like waxy little candle drips of mushrooms, which are really cool. Here's another flowering plant, one of our normal plants. It's got roots, stems, and leaves. We're not gonna touch this one because this right here is poison ivy. So believe it or not, poison ivy comes out with flowers too, and then those flowers eventually turn into their next round of seeds. So we'll put a picture of their flowers up on the screen. So this is one of the super cool things that we're talking about this week. This is a beautiful log covered in moss. And moss is really unique because instead of doing kind of what would be a normal flower and a seed, it's got these tiny little stalks, and this is where it's going to form its spores. So they're a little bit different than plants, if you can see those. They look like tiny little forests, but they obviously use photosynthesis because look how pretty and green they are from all that chlorophyll. And they're obviously growing across the top of the log, so they have a way to hold them down. So this little guy is more moss that is making more moss. So all of these little orange threads with this little stuff on the end, they're making their spores. So this is like their version of seeds. And this is one of the things that makes moss different than maybe your stereotypical plant. This kind of moss is a little different. It's still got these little spores on the end of the stalks, but this moss is a little bit different shaped, so it's shaped a little bit more like clusters of stars than the other stuff we've been looking at. And then down here is another different one. This one almost looks like little tiny strands of the fern we were looking at, so it's just got really tiny thready leaves. Here's another type of moss. If you can see all this red, this is all its little stalks with the spores on the end. If we look down here, we've got some moss right next to my toes on this bridge, and then moss traveling all the way down this log with tiny little mushrooms on it. So usually when you see little white stuff on logs, those are going to be tiny, tiny mushrooms. Just nestled right in there. So we've got some ferns over here, and ferns are one of the oldest species of plant. So a lot of times when you see drawings of dinosaurs, they include ferns because ferns are a really prehistoric type of plant. We can show you some fossils of those. And then under these leaves, this is where they make their spores. So if you can see those tiny, tiny dots, those are how the ferns are going to be produced. So they're different than seeds, and they're not encased in anything like all of our fruits are. But there's just tiny, tiny spores on this leaf. And that's what makes ferns just a little bit different, even though they're definitely still a plant. So this is our most normal type of plant because this plant flowered and is now going to make seeds. And it's normal because we've got roots down here, we've got a stem, and we've got leaves. And then up at the top here, this is where the flowers had been. And so now the petals have all fallen off, and a bee or some other pollinator has mixed the pollen around, has pollinated it, and now this can start to make little seeds inside of here. So that's the most typical way for a plant to work. So this is a really cool flowering plant right here, and this used to be a flower. And now the flower has been pollinated, the petals have fallen off, and it's started to form the seeds inside. So once this is ready, if you broke that case open, you would find some seeds. And there's another one right there.